In this video, I'm going to haul out a hole into my height field and create a tunnel-like feature into my terrain. This is going to be handy for game assets if you're creating a tunnel, cave, or some sort of underground lair or some sort. I'm going to be reusing the height field terrain from a previous video titled Height Fields for Beginners. The link will be in the description. In the previous video, the last operation I did on the height field was an erosion node right before the height field convert node in order to convert it to a polygon for finishing it up that we want to use in a simulation or export it out into Unreal Engine, or this is ready. This is the one that we're done. However, if we want to do more to this height field terrain, we can do more. So starting from here, I throw down the same, again, a height field convert node, which I cached out. I'm just gonna put it here first. So this height field convert node, it's doing something different this time. I'm converting it to a VDB and not a polygon. Now, why would I want to do that? It's already a volume, right? Because I want to use other VDB nodes in Houdini. Now, I'm not gonna go into detail about VDBs. I'm just going to explain why I need it for the height field terrain. Now, the purpose of this, if you've seen the end result of this terrain, this is the resulting terrain at the end, the finished one. You can see that I have a hole here. It's actually a tunnel. This tunnel goes through this mountain range to the other side. And then there's another hole here that goes through. So there's a hole that goes through here, going through here, and all the way down here. So it goes through a couple of mountain ranges. This could be nice for if you're doing a train. It goes through mountains. In order to cut a tunnel through our height field, I start off with a curve. So this isn't my curve. This is the height field. So I draw the curve where I want the tunnel to be. I'm going to show you how to use the curve to draw out the path of the tunnel. So first, let's drop down a curve node. Now go to the last operation that we made on the height field. So this one, I'm going to go to the 3D viewport and make it top view. Now it's getting cut off here. I believe my clipping point for the camera is, because this is too close, I think. I'm going to move it down so I can see the whole terrain. Now I'm going to delete this later, so this doesn't really matter right now. I'm going to put down a merge. Now this is only temporary. This is only so I can actually see what I'm doing. I'm going to merge the transform and the curve. Merge it together. Highlight the curve. Move the cursor over the 3D viewport. Press enter. The cursor turns into cross-eye. And I'm going to put down points on the terrain where I want the path of the tunnel to be. So I'm going to start over here. Click left to put down a point. There we go. 1 point, 2 point. And I want the tunnel to go through these mountains. Okay, say I'm done. Press enter. So there's my curve. And I'm going to delete these two nodes because they were only there so I could see what I was doing on the 3D viewport. Now you have your curve goes through the terrain. After the curve, I throw down a polywire. What this will do, use the curve and create a polygon out of it. Basically, it's a large cylinder that follows the curve, shaping out the tunnel. With the shape of the tunnel, we can use that to subtract it from the terrain that we've created from the height fields. It touches the ground a lot. So what I do is I just transform it and move it up a bit. That's what this does. I'm going to create an attribute and attach it to all the points in this inflated polywire curve that will be the hauled out areas of the tunnel. The attribute will come in handy later on to help indicate which polygons are tunnel areas. I set the default value of the tunnel attribute to be 0 and the value to be 1. The default value needs to be 0 because later on when we transfer this attribute to the rest of the height field, this attribute will default to 0 and only the tunnel areas, which is what we're defining right now, will be 1. So it's important to fill in both the default value and value, even though all the tunnel values we see right now will be 1 at the moment, because this cylinder worm looking like polygon is only indicating all tunnel areas for all the primitives. So I add a tunnel attribute for the primitives, and they all have value 1. This is only so that I'll know that this is the tunnel. I take this geometry and I convert it into a VDB. So I drop down a VDB from polygons. Throw this down here. So here, and I check surface VDB. So that's what I want. Now I have 2 VDBs. One, I forgot to throw down a file cache. You actually don't need a file cache here, but because I'm filming, this will come in handy. Again, remove the $F, save current frame, check this, click the save to disk. So I have 2 VDBs now. I have a tunnel, which is the cylinder VDB, and I have the height field terrain, which is a VDB as well. So 2 VDBs. Now that I have converted both of these geometries into VDBs, I want the tunnel to punch a hole through the height field terrain. So there's something called a VDB Combine, which acts very similar like the Boolean, which is a SOP level operator. But since these are both volumes, we need a VDB Combine, which does a very similar operation, similar to the Boolean. It will take this volume, subtract this volume. It will take the height field terrain VDB and subtract the tunnel VDB. I pre-cached the results of the VDB Combine. Select the VDB Combine, select SDF difference for operation. This will take this one, height field terrain, and subtract the tunnel. And then it'll give us this. So as you can see, there's a hole now. We have a tunnel that goes through the mountain range, or the height field terrain. Say I'm done with this terrain, and I want to finish it off by converting it to a polygon, so I can further use this in a simulation or start building my material for rendering. Let's convert this to a polygon. Now, this is important because we can no longer use the height field convert. I can't throw this down because this is a VDB. We need it as a polygon. After using a VDB Combine node to haul out a hole for the tunnel areas in the terrain, we cannot use the convert height field node anymore. So you cannot throw down a height field convert. It won't work. It's no longer a height field. If you look here, we no longer have those height primitive, mass primitive, cliff primitives. We no longer have those anymore. If you look over here, where it was still height fields, all this is here. So this one is before it is converted. Once we convert that height field into a VDB, we lose all that information. Sorry, this one. Because this one hasn't cooked yet. Once I click this, it will cook forever. But I did cache it. I pre-cooked it ahead of time. So this is the pre-cooked version. Anyways, it only has a surface now. Since after we throw down the height field conversion node, we only have a surface primitive now. We lose all this information. Even after we do the VDB Combine and punch a hole through our height field terrain, we still don't, like, that doesn't give us back any information. We're still stuck with this surface primitive. So we need a convert VDB. That's this convert VDB node. Throw that down. So this VDB convert, for convert to, choose polygons. To finish off the height field, I need to convert it to a format that is more compatible with other systems, in a format that's easier to calculate collisions or other things like that. And I want to export this and start using it. So I throw this down and I convert the volume into the VDB volume into polygons. So you look here, I get 3 million polygons. As opposed to before, this was a surface volume. This was a surface volume here. So now, as I mentioned before, after you convert the height field, you lose all that data. All these data, the bedrock, the mass, the mess of the cliffs, the sediment, the height, the debris, the water, this is important. It's used, we're going to need to use this for shading, material building. Now, in order to get that back, there's something called an attribute transfer, which will transfer attributes from one geometry to another geometry. So let's go back up here. Let's go back all the way up here when we're still in the height field world. Back to the second erosion. This was the last height field operation we did. I'm gonna feed it into and drop down another convert height field node. But this time I convert it into a polygon, directly into a polygon. If you notice, so if I click here, this is what I get right after I put a height, directly convert the height field into a polygon without doing any more changes to it. I immediately get all these attribute data. So all these volume primitives before the conversion into a polygon is now transferred into attributes. So this is nice. This is useful. I'm going to put this over here. I throw it in file cache. And I feed this. This is the polygon one. This is the polygon height terrain that has all these attributes. But it does not have real estate. Okay, this does not have the tunnel. As you can see, this is directly converted because in order to get the tunnel, I needed to convert it into a VDB over here. So I'm just going to show you has the tunnel, but it's in VDB. I had to convert it into VDB, which loses all these primitive data. So what I do, I convert it into a polygon, throw down an attribute transfer. Since I have a polygon here and a polygon here, I can transfer this polygon, the polygon with all the attribute data, but the tunnel one doesn't have any attribute data. We take the one with attribute data and we feed it into the left input of the attribute transfer. So it says geometry to transfer attributes from the ones that contain the attributes. And then I plug in the height field with tunnel into the left input of the attribute transfer. So this is the geometry that we need that has missing data. This one is where we plug in the input where it has data. So what this node will do, it will transfer the attributes from this one into the right side input into the left side input. It will fill in the geometry for us. So then we're left off. If we take a look, we have everything. We have our geometry, we have our tunnel, and we have our attributes, which is really nice. So we have everything. Now this is 3 million points. It's still pretty heavy, in my opinion. If you have a super fast computer, it might not be a difference. So I throw down a poly reduce. And I'm not gonna flag this because it's gonna cook forever. I've already done this ahead of time, pre-cooked it. So this is 30%. I get 664,000 polygons compared to what it was before, which was 3 million polygons. 3 million polygons. So poly reduced to 30%. We get 664. Display wise, it's pretty good. The geometry looks quite the same. It's just more compact. So it's again, it's getting that soft spot in the middle. You have to do trial and error to get the right number. Now, I'm not quite done. I'm still not quite done. If you look carefully here, we have bedrock cliffs, debris, height, mask, and all that good stuff from... Sorry, I keep forgetting to lock it down. Bedrock cliffs and all this good stuff, but I do not have the tunnel attribute. I don't know where the tunnel is. So if I wanted to isolate or build a material, maybe I want the tunnel, the cave inside here, to be pitch dark black or glowing in emissive glow. That's a specific material. I would need an attribute here to indicate that that part. If I want the tunnel to be a specific color defined in the material, I would need the tunnel attribute in order to isolate it. I'm going to put this on the corner here. If you remember correctly, I had made an attribute for the entire tunnel, for the cylinder one. That's this. I gave it a tunnel attribute. I take this tunnel attribute and use the attribute transfer again. The same trick we did with the height field. And I'm going to fill in this height field terrain and transfer this tunnel, all this tunnel information, into the height field terrain to get this. Now, the geometry hasn't changed. What has changed is that if you look here, I now have, if I highlight this, because this tunnel attribute was created primitive attribute. I created primitive attributes for the tunnel. It's in the primitive world. So I have this attribute transfer. I transfer all the primitive attributes from the tunnel into the height field terrain. In our geometry spreadsheet, select, this is points, vertices, primitives. Scroll over, you'll see a tunnel. I'm just going to isolate this. Now it's 0. Why are there zeros? Because the tunnel doesn't exist everywhere. It's obviously it's 0 where there's no tunnel, where the tunnel isn't placed, and it's 1 for the places where there is a tunnel. Now, how do we know this is working or not? You can select the attribute node, click add a blast. What this will do, it will delete it. Delete. What do we want to delete? We want to delete primitives. There's our primitive attributes, which looks a little weird in the middle because this is our height field terrain. Okay, if you look carefully, there's no tunnel here. That's why that part has is missing, because there's nothing here. Now this is the tunnel. That's what we want to shade. So that's how we get the tunnel attribute back into the height field terrain. So if you've noticed, the height field terrain, once you do the VDB combine, you're missing a lot of data. A lot of data is missing. And we have to get it back using this attribute transfer. So I get back all the height field data here, and then I get back all the tunnel data here. I then promote all the because this height the tunnel attributes is in primitive. I promote it 2 points, so it's easier. So I can. So it's here now in the points, and not in the tunnels anymore. This is just easier to manage. It'll be easier for shading build, material building. I throw down a normal because some of the normals are messed up now. What this will just do, it will make it easier to build the shader. I'm finally done. We're left off with a finished height field terrain that is a polygon that has all the bedrock cliffs, the good height field attribute data, and I have my tunnel data. So I have everything I need to build a material for this. As mentioned several times in this video, the attributes are handy for material building, which will probably be covered in a future video that I'll demonstrate how to build a Redshift material for this terrain. Sorry, I only use Redshift as my rendering engine for Houdini. I'm actually thinking of covering a video for Houdini to Blender workflow, because the Blender's cycle engine is very nice, and the fact that it's free is just awesome. The quality of the renders coming from Blender's cycles engine is comparable to commercial software. I'm not kidding. It's not as fast as Redshift's rendering engine, but Redshift's commercial version costs like $700 US, I believe, and Blender's Cycles engine is free. You might be worried that Blender's UI might not be the easiest thing to use, but Blender's new EV 2.8 version has a complete UI redesign, and I find a lot of the menus very intuitive. When I first started out and didn't have the cash to fork out several $100s for Redshift, I used Blender's Cycle engine for the longest time. However, the pipeline to work between Houdini and Blender was never the smoothest thing in the world. But there are a few techniques I learned on the way and can share it with everyone, so I might make a video for that. Thank you for watching and sticking to the end.